If you're a business owner, no one is more familiar with the curse of a 24-hour day than you. Menial tasks can eat away at your day, taking you away from those projects that fund and grow your company. Unfortunately, hiring is a major pain in the ass. Once you navigate all the tax hurdles and benefits packages, you've spent tens of thousands of dollars and numerous hours without any production and no guarantee that your investment will pay off. This is why Busy Bee's Virtual Services is Stranger Encounters' first sponsor. Bee takes a professional approach, full of passion and zeal for optimizing your time. She attacks every project with the vigor and endurance of a business owner because she understands how important your time and focus is. If you're constantly worried about emails, client relationships, and scheduling your next meeting at the expense of more profitable and meaningful tasks, Bee is ready to assist you in achieving maximum results. For a free consultation, call 337-287-8802 or click on the affiliate link on the front page of StrangerEncountersPodcast.com. Whether you're filling a full-time or part-time position, Bee offers affordable virtual services to minimize your risk and free up your day. Call 337-287-8802 or click on the affiliate link on the front page of StrangerEncountersPodcast.com. Welcome to Stranger Encounters. I am Tommy Salmons. I've been struggling with today's episode. I didn't schedule a guest. I've had a real busy couple of weeks, and I've been trying to figure out what today's episode is going to be. And there were a couple of news stories that stuck out to me that some have been covered pretty extensively, some tie back to other episodes, and some I think need to be looked at from a little different light. I'm going to start off with the New Zealand shooter a couple of weeks ago. I haven't really, I'm not even going to lie. I haven't even really looked at it real in depth, but I've read a few things, and I've listened to some commentators, and needless to say, they don't read anything, as you can tell. One of the articles that struck me was an article that was republished in the Libertarian Institute by Matt Agorist from the Free Thought Project. And he starts off with a quote by John Dahlberg Acton. Liberty provokes diversity, and diversity preserves liberty. In the above quote, Acton warns that those who seek to eliminate diversity are a direct threat to liberty. The existence of national and religious minorities is a crucial factor in dividing state power, resisting centralization, and preventing absolute authority. Sadly, however, it appears that there are many forces attempting to subvert this tendency to resist absolute power, and those too weak to resist it are buying in, hook, line, and sinker. A disgusting terrorist animal, whose names will not be mentioned, donned his camera and his rifle last weekend, along with an arsenal of shitpost memes, and took to live streaming the murder of 50 innocent men, women, and children. His motivation for this horror was based solely on his victim's religious preference. The terrorist bragged about wanting to kill Muslims on multiple online forums, and last week this bragging turned into action as he slaughtered innocent people. On one forum in particular, 8chan, this terrorist posted the link to his live stream, along with a link to his manifesto, and told thousands of followers what was about to happen. Instead of immediately chastising this hate-inspired act of terror and calling for him to stop, hundreds of people on the forum espoused their support as they watched his rampage, up to and including leaving comments praising him for individuals' kills, some of whom were children. What this support highlights is that there is a growing sentiment in this country and around the world that fosters hatred over religious views. Because of certain acts carried out by those who claim to be members of one religion, all members of this religion are deemed a threat, and therefore their lives rendered expendable according to this philosophy. But those who wish to exterminate Islam are ignorant of why Islamic extremism is so prevalent in the first place. For decades, the U.S. and its Western allies have been violently and frequently meddling in the Middle East, beginning with the clandestine overthrow of democratically elected leaders, moving on to financing violent extremist groups, and morphing into full-blown invasions of entire countries. The Middle East has been the target of destruction since at least 1953. Ignoring all of the treachery, corruption, and death exported from the U.S. in the last 70 years, the troglodytes in D.C. continue to assert that the terrorists hate our freedom. Sadly, the propaganda being shoved down the throats of Americans by these ill-informed political puppets and their parrots in the media preserves this idiotic assertion. Millions have died in the West's relentless pursuit of nation building and controlling oil. All of it is written off as collateral damage, and the complicit politicians march on. The West is constantly perpetuating the dangerous lie that a massive terrorist threat will always and has always existed and poses a constant threat to you because they disagree with your lifestyle, completely ignoring the last 70 years of death and destruction doled out by their predecessors. Thanks to the sycophants who worship the military-industrial complex, their decades of meddling and funding strategic terrorist organizations who supported their temporary interests have manifested into an actual threat. Do you think that the children of those slain by a decade of bombing and constant threats of drone strikes will simply forget about the atrocities inflicted upon them? Do you think that the parents who watched their babies blown apart by predator drones, or the hospital workers who watched as U.S. bombs rained down from the sky will just turn the other cheek? The reality is that since 9/11, the U.S. and their NATO allies have fostered a breeding ground for extremist and fundamentalist groups. As Americans sat back on their couches and watched the shock and awe on CNN, the U.S. was sowing the seeds for perpetual war and pouring gas on the fire that is religious extremism. They were planting a garden in which 1 million Osama bin Ladens would later bloom. This blood-filled garden has spread across multiple countries in which a holy war of extremism is playing out as tyrants find easy recruits thanks to the war on terror. This militant army of Muslim extremists carries out despicable acts of slaughter against innocent people of all faiths, including other Muslims. Instead of attempting to call out the foreign policy that fosters the growth and spread of this extremism, uneducated people like the terrorist in New Zealand blame the entire religion, despite the overwhelming majority of Muslims being peaceful. To make a brash, sweeping statement about hundreds of millions of people is not only dangerous, but it's entirely false. As the Free Thought Project's Will Grigg points out, these claims must be perplexing to Will Coley, an observant Muslim who serves as National Director of Muslims Liberty and a libertarian organization promoting charity, voluntarism, and mutual respect among people of all backgrounds. Rather than seeking a centralized, despotic, theocratic state, Coley maintains Islam in its original manifestation promoted a decentralized social order in which the believer enjoys unmediated access to God, and all men and institutions are equal before the law. From Coley's perspective, Sharia law does not require universal submission to Muslim rule, but rather dictates that Muslims are to respect the liberties of those who follow a different faith. Aside from the insanely off-kill generalization that highlights a deliberate ignorance among those pushing such fear, as the recent terrorist act in New Zealand illustrates, the effects of said fear are very dangerous. The impact of fools spreading hate have been materializing for several years now, sending Muslim extremists into a fury of celebration, as creating a divide between Muslims and everyone else is their stated mission. If there is one thing that Islamic fundamentalists and Islamophobic fascists like the New Zealand terrorists agree on, it's that there should be no gray zone, only black and white. For those who may be unaware, the gray zone is the zone of peaceful coexistence. Eliminating the gray zone and rendering a world as black and white as the flag of the Islamic State is the ultimate goal of fundamentalists on all sides. In fact, an ISIS publication titled Extinction of the Gray Zone made clear that the strategy has been at play for the past 18 years. The gray zone is critically endangered, rather on the brink of extinction. Its endangerment began with the blessed operation of September 11th, as these operations manifested two camps before the world for mankind to choose between, a camp of Islam and a camp of Kafir, the Crusader coalition. These are the same sentiments expressed by George W. Bush when he infamously said, "Either you are with us or with the terrorists." ISIS' goal from their own publication, A Black and White World, what they call gray zone, is our coexistence zone. Now, the terrorists and the demagogues in the West are getting closer to their goal of divide and conquer than ever before, and the media is playing right along. For decades, Western media has fomented hatred and fear toward Islam as it was necessary to dehumanize before slaughtering them, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. Extremists have capitalized on this and used it as a recruiting tool. Now this is happening with the New Zealand terrorist whose calls to subscribe to PewDiePie's and mention of Candace Owens have been picked up by the media as the impetus behind slaughtering innocent people, as if they have anything to do with murdering innocent people. Nonetheless, innocent conservatives are now being demonized, and the divide is growing stronger as some of them lash back out at everyone on the left. It is a perfect storm. The result is manifesting into two tidal waves of hate that continue to grow as they head right for one another. We are witnessing Muslims being thrown off of buses because of ignorant passengers fearing for their lives. We see physical assaults waged by fearful pawns in ISIS's propaganda campaign against peaceful Muslims who've harmed no one. We are also witnessing innocent Americans being shouted down and their lives threatened for holding certain political beliefs, as both sides call for silencing the other. And it is getting worse. Less than 48 hours after the terrorist act by an anti-Muslim extremist in New Zealand, we witnessed a Muslim extremist commit an act of terror in the Netherlands. If you are willing to silence, hurt, or kill an innocent person because of their religion or peaceful political views, you are no better than ISIS terrorists or the terrorist who murdered the people in New Zealand. What's more, being anti-Muslim in particular is actually hurting the fight against terrorism as well. According to recent polls and studies conducted in the last few years, Muslims have been crucial in helping law enforcement find terror suspects in the United States. Many have served in the military protecting the country against terrorists, and many Muslims have been highly outspoken against terrorist organizations. In 2015, TFTP reported on 70,000 clerics who came together, representing the majority of the Muslim world, and publicly denounced ISIS as a threat to humanity. Also, a Duke University study found more terrorism suspects and perpetrators were brought to the attention of law enforcement by members of the Muslim American community than were discovered through U.S. government investigations. And a Pew survey found that roughly half of U.S. Muslims say their religious leaders aren't speaking out enough against Islamic extremism, reports CNN. The way to truly defeat violent extremists is by rendering their fear and divisive tactics impotent. We need to show these extremists and those being manipulated by their tactics that tolerance and freedom are far more powerful than bigotry and hate. As Acton says, it's a misprint. As Acton says, liberty provokes diversity and diversity preserves liberty. Also, Americans will do well to remember how it was that ISIS and this crisis came to be in the first place, and avoid future murderous blunders that will inevitably fill the ranks of extremist groups with even more people. You can bow down to the will of ISIS and the ethno-statist terrorists by allowing their hate-filled rhetoric and divisive tactics to cloud your mind with fear and hatred, or you can rise up and stand against those who would drive a wedge through the heart of humankind. The choice is yours. I was drawn to this article not because it was on the Libertarian Institute, which is one of the first places I check for any news, but because it's using modern examples to point out what the problem is with collectivist thinking. There's this idea within our society nowadays that based upon your color of your skin. And okay, before I get into that, I have to preface it. It's not just our days. This is something that's been going on for a long, long time. But there is a such thing as the evolution of thought and the evolution of ideas. And we're not prisoners to these ideas or these thoughts of racism. I'm very hesitant to cover anything racist or ideologically driven in this manner when it gets into violence. And it's not because I don't see a problem in today's society. It's because I think by focusing on these immutable characteristics that you're adding to the problem. So, that being said, there is racism. There's no doubt about it. There are people that are racist. There are people that look at other people and see a different color skin and they hate them. They despise them for whatever reason. I'd say in many instances, it's ignorance. And that is to say that they don't know anybody from these other races. And they don't recognize them as being equally human. I would imagine that some of this has to be your upbringing. But I also believe that a lot of this is economic. And what we saw, the unemployment rate skyrocketing, under Obama, kids were seeing parents lose jobs, lose houses, lose property that had been in the family for decades, generation after generation. And they saw a black man in office telling everybody that everything was okay. And that, that is very possibly going to lead to some racism. That's going to lead to certain people within society seeing anybody with the shade of skin of Obama or darker skin as the enemy, as the one who has no compassion for their family's hardships and for the hardships they've gone through. And I use that as an example because since 2001, Islam has been under attack by politicians, by media. And it's become the common view that they are their entire purpose is to kill Western civilization. And this is all collectivist thinking. This is all, well, they are Muslim. They are part of Islam. And so they are the other. And you collectivize, and the media has added on to these atrocities, and politicians have added on to these atrocities, and they've created these ideas within society that extremists, whether they're no matter why they get to the point that they get to, they take drastic action. And the shooter in New Zealand and made it perfectly clear that his entire goal was to add to and inflame an existing culture war within the United States. I guess in order to send us into a hot civil war. And it was because I guess he believes that his side's going to end up winning if it goes hot. And so he's like, so he felt like through his manifesto and through his actions that he could ignite these flames. And the arguing, the pointing your finger at Trump. I don't care what this guy has said about Trump. Trump's never done anything on a personal level this extreme. Now, we could talk about him bombing Somalia. We can talk about foreign policy in Yemen. We can talk about a lot of things that I disagree with Trump on. But as far as being a terrorist in this manner, Trump has never individually gone out and done this. And by pointing the finger at Trump, people are not helping the situation. You're feeding into exactly what the shooter in New Zealand wanted. You're giving him exactly what he wanted. You're adding fuel to the fire that is the culture war. And this draws us back to September 11th, 2001. Osama bin Laden had made it perfectly clear that his entire goal was to draw the United States into Afghanistan in order to bankrupt the United States. And so what continues to happen is these people, these terrorists, are able to accurately predict what the reaction is going to be, and they design their motives, their actions, and their methods in such a way that gets the exact reaction they want. And so when you continue to fight against Democrat or Republican in order to say one side is right above and beyond the other side, you're playing directly into their hands. Just like when us being in Afghanistan 18 years after 9/11, or 17 plus years after 9/11, is playing directly into the hands of Osama bin Laden. It's what he wanted. It's what he was going for. It's what the aim was. So it strikes me odd that so many smart people will continue along the same road, knowing that these people are telling you exactly what they want from you, and you're giving it to them. Because if you were really against what they stood for, you would just go against you would recognize what they're trying to get you to do, and you would do the opposite. But you keep playing into the hands of these people. The next story I want to touch on is the Russia investigation. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because from day one I've found this about as interesting as watching paint dry. For 2 years, tax dollars and time has been wasted on an investigation that everybody knew was bunk. It was bullshit from the get-go. And everybody knew it. Like Glenn Greenwald, Caitlin Johnston, what's his name? I can't think of the guy's name. I can see his face. They had been writing articles since day one that this was bullshit. And every single one of them are progressive types. They're not Republicans by any stretch of the imagination. Michael Tracy's the other guy I was thinking of. So this is no shocker. It's no shock whatsoever that the Mueller probe has ended, and William Barr released a summary that said that there is absolutely zero evidence that the Trump administration had colluded with Russia in any way, shape, or form. And yada, 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 yada. It was a bunch of bullshit from the get-go, and we all knew it was a bunch of bullshit from the get-go. All right. So what we really need to be looking at here, and I know Democrats are already, the Southern District of New York. Whatever, man. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Keep investigating. Like the more you investigate, the less interested I am. Like, seriously. I'm finding it all a bunch of fucking bullshit. And I'm just getting more and more lackadaisical and just less interested by the day. But y'all just keep on going. Because what you're going to do is you're going to get Trump reelected. That's what's going to end up happening. You're going to get him reelected by acting this way. Maybe in the furthest niches of the government, that's the point of pursuing all this bullshit. But those of you who swear to hate Trump with every breath in your body are getting him reelected with every investigation that you advocate the pursuit of, and it's all on you. But here's what we got to look at, man. All right. So number one, Russia, the Russian collusion appears to me that what it was intended to do was intended to get us into another Cold War, possibly a hot war with Russia. And that the intent was for us to overthrow Putin and install a friendly dictator in Russia. This is all I can figure that was going on here with the deep state, that they were really like looking to make a big move on the world stage. Middle East isn't going our way, and North Korea is always a coin flip. So it looked like what they were trying to do is make a big splash and gain some leverage by getting control of Russia. I don't think I have to get into how bad of an idea I think any regime change is, on any level with any country, including Russia. Russia probably being the worst idea, but that's what it appeared to me to be. I'm willing to be wrong, but just from what I've seen, that's how it looked to me of what was going on. What we really should be looking at, though, is the whole problem was the Russian influence of the election, right? Russia had unmitigated influence into the United States. They were able to influence the election of the United States, and they did so illegally by hacking and dispersing emails. Why aren't we talking about the countries that influence elections through lobbying? Why do we allow countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel to get away with lobbying the United States government for influence? Why are we so focused on Russia trying to do all these black ops type spying and hacking and this, that, and the other? There are countries out in the open today lobbying and influencing American elections with money and through their powers. I mean, it was, I want to say it was 2012 or 2013. We heard Obama come up on stage and give a speech. And before the speech was even done, Netanyahu was standing up before Congress, pointing at Obama, saying everything he just said is bullshit and it's not going to happen. Why do these people have the influence they have in the United States? Who is the Congress representing? Are they representing the people of the United States, or are they representing these other countries? Or are they just playing middleman between the countries and the people? Like, we have the right to know this. And this is something that we should really like hammer home, that, hey man, we're sick of y'all taking this money and doing the bidding of all these countries at the expense of our citizens, at the expense of our military personnel, at the expense of our riches, at the expense of our tax dollars. You know, like, I have a serious problem with welfare because I don't think it's right to take from people what they've rightfully earned and give to people that haven't rightfully earned it. Okay, I have a problem with that. But I have much more of a problem. I could actually deal with the whole welfare system a lot longer than I can deal with the United States propping up all these other regimes. What do these other countries have to do with us? It's not my problem. I don't live in these other countries. Now, if you say, well, the United States has to maintain some sort of relationship, well, I'm not saying don't have a relationship with the countries. Open up the trade barriers. Open up trade with all these countries. Was it Milton Friedman that had the old saying, where goods cross borders, armies won't? We'll be fucking fine and friendly with these people if we're trading with these people. We don't have to be like trading money and political favors with them at the expense of the citizens of each of the countries. I don't really have anything else to say about the Russian collusion. I know that wasn't extensively on the Russian collusion, but I find the entire Russian aspect of the collusion conversation to be pointless and boring. So that's kind of my thought on that. The next story I want to talk about for a second, and I appreciate y'all hanging with me. I know I don't talk about news that much in the way I'm talking about today, but this story actually ties back to last week's episode in a way. In the state of Missouri, they passed State Bill 367. They're waiting on the governor's signature, if I'm not mistaken. But what State Bill 367 says is that any federal gun control law that infringes on the right of a free people to keep and bear arms will no longer be recognized in the state of Missouri. And they're so serious about this, they are threatening any federal agent that acts within the Missouri border to enforce a federal gun control law that they deem null and void will be arrested and prosecuted as a criminal. This gets back to the fact that the states have the right and they have the authority to overthrow what the federal government says. The federal government, the Supreme Court, wants you to believe that the federal government is the end-all be-all when it comes to law, but they're not. They have specific authorities delegated to them by the Constitution. And what is not specifically delegated, and it says this straight up in the Constitution, what is not specifically delegated to the federal government is left up to the people and the states. And it is about time that we see states like Missouri stand up to the federal government and say, you know what, enough's enough. We're not going to deal with it anymore. We don't agree with what you're doing. You don't represent us. There are only certain minute factors within this contract that we signed to be part of this union that you actually have any authority over, and we do not recognize any overreaching of your authority. So step back and get out of our fucking lives and get out of our fucking business. Let us do our thing and let us handle our own damn state. And that's what every state should be doing. Every state should be worried about maintaining themselves and stop looking to the federal government to balance it all out. There are 350 million people in this country, and not everyone is going to agree on how to live. Allow the states to design themselves the way they want to be designed, and then people have the option to move to a state that is better suited to their style of living, to their principles, to their belief system, and to the way that they want to function within society. And this is what Missouri is doing. And what Missouri is doing is very, very, very good for freedom. And it's very good for gun rights. And even those of you who are against guns, and who are pro-gun control should be able to look to Missouri and say, you know what? I disagree with this law, but I agree with what they're doing. Because this gives you people the opportunity to look at Trump and what he's doing in the federal government and to turn to your state legislatures and say, you know what? I disagree with what Trump's doing, and I disagree with what the Republican Congress is doing, and I disagree with this, and we need to do something on the state level that does not include the federal level, because the federal level is jacking this up, and we need to deem this law null and void. And this was very prominent back in the day. South Carolina was known to have done this during slavery. There were many, many, many states that nullified federal law by just refusing to enforce it. There are not enough federal agents to enforce federal law within states. It is up to the states to participate with the federal law. And it is up to the voters to turn to the states and say, stop working with these guys. We don't have to work with these guys. We don't agree with these people, and we don't have to enforce their laws. And if the state stops enforcing federal law on the state and municipal and the local law enforcement side of it, the federal laws will never be enforced. And this is something very important that it seems like the majority of Americans have forgotten. We have the power to nullify the federal government. The federal government does not have power over us. And I am applauding Missouri all day today for getting out there and showing the United States and the people of this country that, hey, we have the power to do this, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing the federal government can do about it. And if they want to send in their goons from Washington, D.C. with their little FBI badges to come in our state and confiscate guns or arrest law-abiding citizens for owning a piece of property that they deem illegal, we will arrest them for theft. Hopefully they get them for armed robbery, because you know that the federal agents are coming in there with guns. So they should be charging these people with the max sentence for armed robbery, because they're not afraid to use force. And they've proven that time and time again. So I thought that was a really hopeful, inspirational type story. I was really excited to have seen that Missouri is taking that path, and they are going that route, and that's good. That's absolutely good for freedom, whether you agree with the law or not. That's absolutely good for the power of each individual citizen moving forward. So those were pretty much the three stories I wanted to cover. I know I don't typically touch on news in this fashion very often. This was kind of it was different, but I wanted to do something a little different, and I really didn't know how I wanted to do it, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. That was Stranger Encounters. I am Tommy Salmons. Late.